Happy Tuesday evening, ladies and gentlemen, and you are joining me back with another episode of Woo Fantasy, as always brought to you by Rotoballer.com and always Underdog Fantasy. That is right, Underdog Fantasy, your one-stop shop for all things best ball. Go to Underdog Fantasy, promo code WOO. Also go to Rotoballer.com. Premium package for everything that's available to you, regardless of sport. We are your one-stop shop for all things fantasy on rotoballer.com. So check us out there. Promo code WOO gives you a premium discount on that package. So as we are getting things kicked off tonight, I'm going to be joined by our special guest here in just a little bit, Josh Larky of the 33rd team. Going to bring Josh on. We're going to talk a little bit of sleepers and fades at the running back position as we get into running back preview. That is the purpose of tonight's episode. I'm going to kind of go through my running back rankings that you can find over at rotoballer.com as well. So obviously, getting into the discussion with the running back position, the big news was overnight as we got into Tuesday morning. Saquon Barkley. We talked about it on the podcast just last week. I kind of told you how I felt about Saquon Barkley. I thought he would show up to training camp a little bit sooner than as opposed to Josh Jacobs. We'll get into him as well. Josh Jacobs is obviously there's some conjecture going on with him and Raiders right now. He left the Raiders training camp. Flew out of Vegas, is going to work out on his own. But Barkley signs his signs a new one-year deal. Incentive laden, gives him an extra $900K on the deal, takes him up to $11 million total. So it's a little bit more than what he would have got on the franchise tag. So good news for fantasy owners, fantasy managers out there. Really, you have no hesitation at all with Saquon Barkley. He's going to be in camp. He's going to be a full go, ready to go. Your only hesitation now with Saquon Barkley is where do you slot him in? And when it comes to the rankings, that's something we're going to get into here in just a minute. And other piece of news I just wanted to kind of touch on real quick before we get into the rankings discussion. Obviously, news just broke not 30 minutes ago. Justin Herbert signs a new extension with the Los Angeles Chargers. Is going to be extended through 2029 with the team. $262.5 million. My goodness, we are just raising the bar when it comes to the quarterback market. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on with a lot of these quarterbacks as the contracts are going to start to come up. Yeah, Joe Burrow is going to be a guy that we're going to be looking at here coming up in the next year also. So money going up for the quarterbacks, money going down for the running backs. And that's disheartening is what we've found out over the last few days. Obviously, there was a lot of talk over the media the last couple of days with the running backs going. A lot of the big names at the positions going and having a discussion, having a meeting with them, with each other over a Zoom call, trying to figure out what they can do to better their chances as far as long-term deals, more incentives at the running back position, just to get paid a little bit more. Because we've seen that, we've talked about it ad nauseum at this point. Running backs are just getting devalued year after year. You're seeing the teams that are just willing to let go of quality players to go with unproven talent just to save a buck, and that's something that's going to be talked about over the course of really this whole entire 2023 season, is how things are going to play out for the running backs. And because if you really look get down to the nuts and bolts of it, you're not going to have a collecting a bargaining agreement change for the NFL until I believe 2030 is when that comes up for a renegotiation. So it's not like the running backs are going to have a lot of leverage to use in a collective bargaining agreement over the course of the next little bit. So something to keep in mind of, especially like we talked about in last week's podcast, as you're working on like dynasty rosters, especially, is work your roster builds, work how you value your running back position into your dynasty with the mindset of how an NFL GM is looking at that position currently, because they really are they're playing out that rookie contract, then they're letting them walk, going to another rookie, and then playing it out that way at that point in time. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. So As we get into it, just wanted to kind of go over and talk about my rankings the with rotoballer.com. If you can kind of look on the screen, I've got the rankings up and we're looking at things right now. And when it boils down to it, if you're looking at especially the top of the board with the RB1s, the way I've looked at it in drafts that I've done so far and the way that I've got it set up in rankings, and I think it's pretty much about consensus at this point in time, is top 8 are a pretty well kind of agreed upon, whether, where you're ranking them yourself or where you see other guys ranking them in the industry, as opposed to myself. It kind of fluctuates, depends on, guys here and there. Christian McCaffrey, I think, is the solid RB1 when things are getting discussed at this point in time. I know my good buddy Debro over at Fantasy Pros is a very big proponent of Tony Pollard, has him as his RB1. As you can see, I've got Pollard all the way down at RB6. That I'm kind of baking in, yes, a little bit of an increase when it comes to extra workload. There's going to be more scoring opportunities for Pollard this year, but even with the increase in potential scoring opportunities, I keep thinking we're going to bring in that veteran running back, and it's going to kind of decrease his chances when it comes to the scoring opportunities. I tend to think we're going to bring Zeke Elliott back into the fold on a team-friendly deal with Dallas. He's going to maintain that short yardage role and a little bit more of the touchdown type of vulture that we all hate to see when it comes to fantasy, and that's kind of where I've slotted in Pollard as far as the rankings are concerned. The big one, obviously, you got McCaffrey, you got Eckler at the top. I think you can kind of make a case once you start leaving from that point down. Nick Chubb is the guy that there's a lot of hype surrounding right now. We keep seeing his name rise up the draft boards. I've even seen in a lot of the underdog drafts, he's even peeking into the back half of the first round now, with a lot of the talk amongst guys in the industry that are pushing Nick Chubb and that potential with what he can do in that Cleveland Browns offense now as we get into 2023. There's an expectation that he's going to receive a little bit more of a passing game role this year. And what's been the argument with Nick Chubb over the last 2 to 3 years is if he were to get an increase in passing game usage, Katie bar the door. He's absolutely going to smash, because he's always a threat each year in and year out, to be the rushing yardage leader. Which I believe he will be in 2023. I think he's going to lead the NFL in rushing yards. So that's why I've kind of propped him up to the RB3 at this point in time. But then after that, you got Jonathan Taylor, went on to the pup this today with the Colts, off-season surgery on the foot. That's kind of been talked about here and there. But obviously he didn't show up to camp too. So he's unhappy with his contract. Another running back that is really down in the dumps with what they've been given as far as pay, what they've been, they're not getting paid with what they bring to the team. So that's actually another guy that you have to kind of really start to think about. And as the training camps unfold and as we start to see practices, Jonathan Taylor, when he shows up, I think he's obviously going to be the guy that's in your top 5. The question with Jonathan Taylor this year is Anthony Richardson under center. How much of a headache is that going to cause Taylor managers? Will he take away goal line rushes from Taylor, kind of in a similar situation we see with Josh Allen and the Bills? Moving down the list a little bit, obviously I've got Barkley at 7. I've kind of trended him down a little bit. We saw some inefficiencies with him late in the year last year, but the guy touches the ball a tremendous amount. So you're going to see that increased, that usage is going to kind of be his safe floor for Barkley. Obviously going to be an RB1. He's going to produce those numbers, but just where's the upside? Is he an upside as a top 3 back? That I don't believe. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to kind of be in that back, but outside top 5, but definitely inside the top 10 type of running back this year. And the tried and true Derrick Henry, I got at 8. Let's be honest. I think this is going to be the last year in Tennessee. I think they're going to run him into the ground if they don't trade him at some point during the year. We'll see how the season goes and how things unfold for the Titans. But that's something to kind of keep an eye on with Henry. I think you got one more solid year, great year, high usage with Derrick Henry before you start to, you see him moved on from a Tennessee perspective. So but then that's when the questions start. And like I mentioned, I think that top 8 is really solidified at this point in time. Guys are going to be kind of moving in and out when it comes to where they're going to be slotted in at. You can kind of vary your rankings at that point with 1 through 8. But outside of that, that's where the question marks start. Ramondre Stevenson, is he going to maintain a high usage in that backfield with the Patriots? Are they going to sign a Dalvin Cook? Are they going to sign a Leonard Fournette? Are they going to give a little bit of that passing down work to another back in that backfield? Josh Jacobs, we just mentioned the issues with the Raiders, not happy with the contract. When's he show up? Will he miss games? How many will he miss? That's the other question. Najee Harris and then Joe Mixon are both guys that are really looked down on by the fantasy industry. Both are heavy usage backs, but showed a lot of inefficiency in their roles with their respective teams in 2022. I'm of the mindset of when you get these guys, as the back end of an RB1, of the high end RB2, you're wanting guys that are going to get those opportunities. And Najee Harris and Joe Mixon are those two types of backs that are going to give you those opportunities. But then as you look down through the rest of the top 20, looking at Aaron Jones at 13, obviously looked really good last year, but now the offense is going to change with Aaron Rodgers out of that offense. I think there's going to be an increase in efficiency for Aaron Jones this year too. Breece Hall, question mark with the injury. He's on the PUP currently. Where will he be brought back from the PUP? Will he go week 1? I'm feeling good with that. I've got a lot of comfort with Breece Hall right now. Then you get into the guys that are going to be split backfields. You're getting in your Travis Etienne's at 15, Jahmyr Gibbs at 16, Damian Pierce at 17, splitting time with Devin Singletary expected this year. You're going to probably see Singletary get a lot of the passing down usage. Rachaad White at 18. We did see today that Sean Tucker, fully healthy. That's going to be a name to keep in mind through training camp and into the season. If he makes the team, I think he will. And then Dalvin Cook, I've got at 19, still holding out hope currently that he will be signing with the Miami Dolphins. But obviously there's conjecture. He's been moved to the favorite. The Patriots have been moved to the favorite to sign Dalvin Cook in the last week. I don't think that's going to be a fit there. So I think it's down to the Jets and the Dolphins. And obviously the Dolphins are going to give them the better chance as far as opportunities and usage and really kind of display what he can do. And then you get in rounding out the top 20, Kenneth Walker, the third, and then finishing out the RB2s, Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins, David Montgomery, who is criminally slept on right now. I've talked about it ad nauseum on Twitter, how I think he's going to be a solid RB2 this year just from scoring opportunities alone. And then Miles Sanders are going to round out that top 24 at the position. Miles Sanders going to Carolina, obviously taking over the running back duties for the Carolina Panthers, who have Bryce Young at quarterback. So it remains to be seen how that offense is going to look. So I think that kind of gives you a little bit of a pause to how you want to view a guy like a Miles Sanders. So that's the guys that I've got at the top 24 as things currently stand. And just kind of wanted to touch on these rankings and how things are going to look as we get into to the discussion with the running backs. And as we are going to discuss the running backs, that is why I am here to bring on our guest for this evening. And that's going to be the one, the only, the man. You all know him from Twitter. He is widely taught. He is widely viewed on Twitter. Big presence, obviously, on TikTok as well. He is from the 33rd team. And as we're waiting to bring him on, currently we got him, I think he's loading back in. And boom, there he is, the man, Josh Larky from the 33rd team. Josh, how are we doing this evening?
I'm doing well, Brandon. Thanks for having me on. I'm ready to talk some running backs.
Excellent. That's why we're here, man. I've just been going over my top 24 at the position. Obviously, we're going to kind of get into talk about how the running back position looks heading into training camp, how we're viewing this position in general. Obviously, you've seen a lot of the drafts that we've done up until this point. Most of the industry, most of the people that are doing the drafts right now, everybody's attacking that wide receiver position. So you're seeing a lot of that running back talent move down the board a little bit. So one chip that fell in our favor today, obviously, was Saquon Barkley signing his deal with the Giants. How are you viewing Saquon Barkley now? Now that he's in the fold and he's ready to go with the Giants, where are you viewing him currently? You excited about the opportunities that he's going to present second year with Daboll? What are we looking at with Barkley?
Yeah, I don't think we should overthink Saquon too much. He's a top 5 fantasy running back. How many running backs out there can get 295 carries in a season with 76 targets?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Maybe we're hoping Bijan gets there as well. Saquon has a pretty unique role, and I ultimately think that he's big, he's fast. The Giants offense quietly scored the 15th most points last year. So in Daboll year 1 with no receivers, they were already above average. Now, not that they have amazing receivers, but it's fortified with depth. They brought Darren Waller, and defenses simply can't key in on Saquon. The offensive line is young. It should improve. So I'm actually quite optimistic about Saquon. All of my running back rankings up at the 33rdteam.com for free later this week. I think Saquon's probably going to be my RB 4 or 5. So I'm trying to decide kind of like where he is. He and Nick Chubb are a nice dichotomy for me right now, but he's going to fall somewhere in that range.
Right. That was the other name I kind of wanted to bring up and get into a little bit as well, as Nick Chubb. Talking about him prior to bringing you on. He's been the guy that we've seen over the course of like the last month and a half. We in the industry have started to kind of push him up a little bit, talking about the expected workload, passing down usage, what might come of Nick Chubb in that Cleveland Browns offense this year. So I've moved him up as right now at RB3. I've seen him leak into the back end of the first round in some underdog drafts that I've done here lately. And I think that's where we're going to kind of see him slot in, is that front half of round 2 once the drafts really kick in. So comparable to Saquon Barkley, obviously both are high usage backs. Do you feel that there's a difference between the efficiency of these two backs that's going to lead you one way or another? And which way would you lean if the decision comes to you in a draft?
I think I'd probably go with Saquon. So I'm kind of waffling. I think I'd take Saquon over Chubb purely because the carries per game will be similar. Yes, Chubb's probably going to be more efficient. Yes, he's probably going to score more touchdowns, but that's not definitive. We see random guys have touchdown and efficiency spikes all the time. Ultimately, we just want volume. Mm-hmm. And while I'm projecting the target increase for Nick Chubb, I'm projecting that. We don't have to project that with Saquon. So for me, I'd still lean Saquon there, but I think we're kind of splitting hairs. Like if you said, hey, I've got Chubb ahead of Saquon, I wouldn't really have too much pushback, since at the end of the day, I think they're both going to smash in fantasy, assuming they stay healthy. Since, I mean, what are we thinking like with Nick Chubb? Probably like 300-ish carries, 50 targets. That's pretty good considering that everything's going to be super efficient. And the Browns might have the NFL's best offensive line for this upcoming season. So I slightly lean Saquon, but again, we're splitting hairs. So I have them in the same tier right now. And that's kind of how I'm viewing it, is that the known targets for Saquon pushes him over the edge.
Right. And that's what I think depends on the format that you're playing in. Of course, you get in the full point PPR, half point PPR, you're going to get a little bit of an edge to Saquon when it comes to that. What I was saying before bringing you on too, I was kind of going over those RB1s, and I feel like you've got around about that top 7, top 8. And at that point, those guys are kind of really around the same, depending on where you want to slot them in your rankings. All those guys I think are considered to be inside that top 8. But once you get outside of that, that's when the question marks start. That's when you're getting into your guys like your Najee Harris's and your Joe Mixons. And then, of course, Josh Jacobs, who, we found out over the course of the last couple of days, not in camp, left Las Vegas, said, I'm going to go train on my own. And so now the question mark begins with Josh Jacobs. Last year's leading rusher was a marvel for people that grabbed him in the middle rounds of drafts last year, because we all avoided him for the most part. Now he's coming into this year doesn't want to play on the tag. What are you feeling with Josh Jacobs right now? Do you feel he'll show up before the start of the year, or do you think he's got his foot firmly entrenched and sitting out and making a point?
I think he's probably the most likely guy at this point to really miss games. And I think there's a few reasons for it. And I think it starts with his touches. The guy had
Mm-hmm.
393 touches last year. That
Yeah.
sounds like a lot. And if you thought that was a lot, it is. That's the 5th most by any player over the past decade. Only 4 guys have had more touches over the past 10 years than Jacobs did last season. And generally, unless it's a Hall of Fame caliber running back, I did the analysis. When you get a touch workload that looks anything like that, the next season is generally not very friendly to you on the injury front. Simply because if they try and repeat that workload, we pretty much hit the hole in one last year with that
Mm-hmm.
Josh Jacobs season, staying healthy, getting all those touches. I mean, that's over 20 touches a game for a guy that's slow. He's shifty, but he's not extremely elusive.
Yeah.
So I think for him, it makes sense if he's like, oh, my agent's letting me know like this kind of workload, probably not going to stay healthy. He wants that long-term deal. And I think it makes sense if they're saying, hey, we want you to get this workload again, for him to say, you know what, I'm willing to sit out a few games until we get something set up. Since if I were him, I wouldn't want to play on that tag, since I mean, another season where they try and force that on him,
Yeah.
his career could very well be over. And this could be another Todd Gurley story where you go, oh my God, he was here and then he left. And I think Jacobs could honestly be like that. And I think he knows that, which is why he's really sticking his foot down.
Yeah, and it seems like that's the fate of the running back position, as we've seen over the course of the last year or two. Is, I was talking about that before bringing you on, is that Zoom meeting that the running backs held, is they're trying to come up with something to give them leverage, some kind of ideas that they can, to be more team-friendly deals and be able to get their own money and get paid as well. They're trying to come up with ideas, but it's just not going their way. I've even said it on Twitter over the course of the last few days, is that they can do all the meetings that they want. The owners at the end of the day are just going to tell them, no, we're not going to listen to it. We've devalued your position. We don't feel like that it's it's not going to give us any extra additional value to pay you, as opposed to a quarterback like we saw Justin Herbert just get paid before coming on the air. It's just bad news for the running backs all around. So Josh Jacobs is just another story there. And another guy that I think we're going to run into that similar situation with, is coming into the end of this year and into next year, is Derrick Henry. I think Derrick Henry, I've mentioned it, I think this might be his last year in Tennessee, whether he's traded or not. And you mentioned a guy that Hall of Fame caliber running back, a lot of tread on the tires, but he's just superhuman when it comes to ability to stay on the field. So I think Derrick Henry, last year, I think he's going to see this is his last season of extreme usage with that Tennessee Titans offense. The DeAndre Hopkins signing, do you think that they're going to try to dial back the touches for Henry this year with Hopkins in the fold? How do you think that that's going to look for Henry this year?
I'm actually not really concerned with Henry, since I think the two ways that this goes is, one, they still just give him his touches.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. He gets his touches. Great. That's what we want. The most touches among running backs. Like no guy will ever have the 30 touch weekly ceiling like a Derrick Henry. And let's say they scale back his touches a bit and they go more pass heavy. The offense is probably better, since I think we'd all agree passing is generally a smarter strategy than just pounding the football.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe like a little bit fewer carries, but the rushing efficiency might go up. The rushing touchdowns might go up. So I actually think, just regardless of the game plan, just having Hopkins helps. Usually a better offense is not a net negative to the running back. It's not like they're going to say, hey, Derek, we were giving you 24 carries a game. We're going to give you 12 now. I'm really not that worried. What are they going to give him, like 21, 22? Right. So I really don't try and play the game of like exactly how many carries, just because if we think about this for fantasy football, what does 4 yards a carry get you? 0.4 fantasy points a carry.
Mm-hmm.
I truly don't care about the carries. I want him to have the long runs. I want him to have the touchdowns, and that will just kind of happen organically. So me saying like, oh, does he have 21 versus 22 carries? That's not really moving the needle for fantasy points like a Hopkins would when you say, oh, hey, they're suddenly like the 9th highest scoring offense in the NFL. You'd be like, oh yeah, I think I'd prefer that for the big dog.
Yeah. I think that's going to be something that, we saw it with Jacobs last year, that high usage. I think that Derrick Henry, like I said, superhuman. They're going to just keep giving him the usage this year. And I don't think we have to overthink that, like you just mentioned as well. But then getting out out of that and getting into, let's talk some sleepers for the 2023 season. Who are some names right now that you're seeing as these, we talked about the running backs kind of starting to slide down the board a little bit, that you can see yourself getting at a good value in drafts and being able to get those, premium type of picks as you build your roster elsewhere?
How far down do you want me to go for sleepers? I've got some names listed. RB what onward? Where are we going to cut it off?
We can go as far as you want to go down the board. I'm good with it as well. Like all the way out to, outside the top 50 at the running back position. We can even go that far.
Oh, in terms of like, who do I need to exclude? Like, is RB 25 a sleeper since that's outside the top 24? You want me to go outside like RB 36 even? I'll go either way.
I would say especially outside of the top 24, guys that you think you can get outside the top 24 that are even going to come into, let's say, an RB2 type of performance by the year's end.
Perfect. I'm asking this because I can't stop touting the consensus RB25 on the Fantasy Pros half PPR rankings. He's the RB25 on Underdog last time I checked. It's David Money Montgomery. I cannot get enough David Montgomery, and I'll give you a few reasons why. So this is a player I have never liked for fantasy. Yeah. I never wanted round 3, round 4 David Montgomery on the Bears. Suddenly, he goes to the Lions with a premium offensive line. They scored the 5th most points in the NFL last season. Jamal Williams led the NFL in rushing touchdowns. We should just like the Lions to begin with. We also like Jared Goff. He's immobile. Again, really good for Lions running backs. And as we all know, DeAndre Swift, he was terrible last year, right? So bad. He never played. It was just Jamal Williams and scraps, right? It was terrible. And then you look up and you realize the Lions running back room had the most PPR fantasy points in the NFL last year.
Yeah.
Despite terrible health among that running back room. This is a fantasy gold mine. And we haven't even gotten to Montgomery or his backfield mate. We'll start with his backfield mate, Jahmyr Gibbs. He's awesome. I actually like to draft Jahmyr Gibbs. He was taken at pick 12 by the Lions in the NFL draft. We know what that means. Draft capital, running back. Ooh, we're always excited. Jahmyr Gibbs, extremely fast. He runs in the 4.3s. Mm-hmm. This is awesome. We love this. He's like the reincarnation of Christian McCaffrey as a pass catcher. We love this. And then we look at McCaffrey's rookie season, which I think is the perfect comp, considering Gibbs is 199 pounds. And you see that Christian McCaffrey didn't hit 120 carries. He had 80 receptions, but he was under 120 carries. I think Gibbs is in line for a similar workload. And one thing I'm certain of is NFL teams run the football. Generally 400-ish times do the running backs get carries. All right, so let's say Gibbs is much better than McCaffrey on the ground. He handles higher volume. He gets 150 carries. He's getting close to 10 a game. Well, okay, there's 250 carries there.
Yep.
Montgomery has so much work here. I don't think people realize unless people do projections, I don't think they realize how much volume is in each running back room. And simply saying like, oh, be careful because there's a good guy there. Well, unless the good guy's getting volume, then I really don't care. I love that David Montgomery's got 25 pounds on Gibbs. He's probably going to be the goal line back. David Montgomery's a good pass catcher. When he's in there on first or second downs with the immobile Jared Goff, he's going to be catching dump offs. He flirts with 250 touches at least every single season. Montgomery's averaged 1,200 total yards per season over his 4 years. I don't know what's not to like here. He looks like he's going to do exactly what he did with the Bears, possibly more efficiently. And now he goes in round 8.
Yeah. Now, you're speaking to my heart on this one. Is David Montgomery is a guy that I've been touting for the last couple of weeks. I've had discussions ad nauseum through whether it's our Rotoballer group chat that we've got on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it now. But talking about Jamal Williams' outlier season last year, he had 33 carries from inside the 5 for 17 touchdowns. And if we're going into that point and you cut it in half and give those numbers to David Montgomery this year, that wasn't a part of his game, you're obviously looking at a guy that's comfortably an RB2, and you're now. So David Montgomery is a guy that I absolutely love getting in drafts right now. You mentioned in round 8, it's an absolute lockdown, hit the button as soon as it comes to you in the draft right now. I love that pick out of that.
I've got a few more. We'll go
next guy up
if you want. Oh, keep going.
Yeah, let's go. Sure.
Yeah. We'll go a decent bit deeper now. So let's drop all the way down to the RB40 on Fantasy Pros consensus. That's what I'll use right now, unless someone has a better thing to use. We'll just use Fantasy Pros. It's free. Everyone can see those rankings. The RB40 and half PPR is Zach Charbonnet. I think Zach Charbonnet could very well be fantasy relevant. Zach Charbonnet has second-round draft capital. We like that. Same draft capital as guys like Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb. All right. I'm getting interested. He's big. He's pretty fast and athletic. All right, we're getting more interested. Oh, he's a good pass catcher. All right, we like that as well for fantasy. Now let's look at the team. The Seahawks are awesome. This is going to be one of the NFL's best offenses. I think they're probably going to be in the top 5, top 6 for scoring NFL points. When you have Geno Smith, he already commandeered the 9th best scoring offense last year, and all they did was take the best receiver in the NFL draft and just stack it on.
Yeah.
Like it was already a finished product, a great offense. And they said, hey, you've got Metcalf, you've got Lockett. We're going to give you Jackson Smith and Jigba in round 1. Oh, you want more? Fine. In round 2, we'll give you another running back, Zach Charbonnet. Their 2 tackles were rookies last year. They're going to be better this year. The offensive line is going to be pretty good. They're going to maul people. And Kenneth Walker is really, really good at breakaway runs.
Yeah.
Those score fantasy points. However, they don't always put you in the favor of the coaching staff when you're very boom or bust. Kenneth Walker is very much like Saquon Barkley as a runner, where he's probably going to frustrate you most of his carries. And then every now and then you go, oh my goodness, he made 6 guys miss and he scored the touchdown. The Seahawks might not like that. I don't think they like that. They did just draft Charbonnet after taking Walker the year before. I think Charbonnet is definitively the better pass catcher. He's got a bigger frame. He might be the one that takes goal line carries. And he might be in there for a lot of base down work as well, especially as the season moves along. And at RB40, how many guys in that range have legitimate top 5 running back upside with 1 injury? Kenneth Walker goes down, and then, oh my goodness, we are throwing a Zach Charbonnet fantasy points party. So at RB40, I'm very, very interested. The perfect guy you just throw on your bench, and he might be flex viable just to begin with. And if not, the second that Walker has an injury for a week, or maybe Charbonnet even just forces his hand after a few weeks and they go, wow, Charbonnet's just better. There's so many paths for a running back like this to hit in fantasy.
Yeah, and we kind of saw it towards the end of the year last year, and you mentioned Kenneth Walker. Broke away the long touchdown runs, big runs here and there, but overall kind of seemed to hit a little bit of a wall when it comes to his efficiency in the backfield. And I think that's what you're talking about with the coaching staff. They saw it for the whole year out of Kenneth Walker when he got the full-time role when Rashad Penny went down. Bring in Zach Charbonnet now with that draft capital. And obviously, we all know Pete Carroll, that's his bread and butter. He wants to run the football. That's tried and true. That's really what they want to do. And then kind of open the passing game up with an efficient running game. And I agree with you. I'm over the market myself right now on Charbonnet. I have him over that mark in my rankings. So I'm kind of right there with you. I've got him as a guy that's right there on that RB3 line. So definitely a guy that I think could fit into the line in your lineups in a flex position week in and week out. Just a matter of how well he kind of acclimates into the system early on. And obviously, I'll touch on it a little bit later when we kind of talk about rookie running backs, but he's definitely a guy we've seen over the years. Rookie running backs do come in. They start off a little bit slow somewhat, but as the year progresses, those guys are really fantasy gold mines, like you mentioned, later on in the year. So I'm with you with Zach Charbonnet as well. I think there's plenty of points to be had in that Seattle backfield between the two of them.
I'd agree there. I don't think we should fade Walker fully, but I'm definitely getting more Charbonnet since anytime there's an ambiguous situation like that and one guy's markedly cheaper and looks kind of similar, I'll just take the guy that's cheaper, especially when running backs get so injured. Why would I waste premium fantasy draft capital when I'm just not quite sure how this will play out?
Yeah, and you could do it similar to the model we saw a few years back with Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram in that Saints backfield. Not going to say that they're going to be outstanding RB1, RB2 type numbers, but you can get them based on draft capital right now and really lock down that backfield in your drafts currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Gibbs, Montgomery, who we talked about, and then I think Walker, Charbonnet are kind of the two backfields where I think we could really see two guys be fantasy relevant. Those are kind of the two that I've looked at as like, oh, you have two top 24 backs on the same roster.
Right. Yes. So another name you're looking at, if you want to go even deeper, we can go on down the list a little bit more. But what's a guy that you yourself are really high on right now as a potential sleeper?
So I think the farthest guy down that I can actually see being fantasy relevant early in the season without an injury would be Roschon Johnson down at RB 55. We went deep, folks. So with Roschon Johnson, this is not a player I'm going to start week one, most likely, unless we hear something strange from the coaches and they say, hey, this is our bell cow. But I think let's zoom out for a second. Let's talk about the Bears rush attack. So the Bears had the most rushing yards last year. And when you look at their running back room, it's actually interesting. They have the least invested in a running back room among every single NFL team. Mm-hmm. Look across the board. You cannot find a running back room like this. Khalil Herbert, the quote unquote starter, was drafted in the 6th round. Deonta Foreman, the veteran that they signed, was a 1-year, $2 million deal. And then rookie Roschon Johnson was taken in round 4. We've got 2 day 3 draft capital backs and a guy that's on the borderline veteran minimum. That is the running back room. One thing that Khalil Herbert and Deonta Foreman don't do is they're not very good pass catchers. They are great between the tackles runners, but Roschon Johnson's almost certainly a better pass catcher. He demonstrated that at Texas. He had over 20 receptions as a true freshman. That's very impressive. I like that. Mm-hmm. Already the best pass catching back. I don't really know where Roschon fits as a runner. He was always behind Bijan. Yeah. But there is a chance that he's good because, again, he was behind Bijan. If he was behind some terrible running back, I'd say, I'm just less interested. But there's no investment in that running back room, including Roschon. But hey, Roschon's really cheap, and he's the best pass catcher. I think Herbert is probably a better pure runner than Deonta Foreman.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. Foreman could be better. I am so certain, though, that Roschon has the unique skill set with the pass catching. I could see a world where he suddenly becomes the 3rd down plus back in what could be a decent Bears offense where this defense is atrocious once again, and the offense has to score a lot of points to keep up. And I think Roschon is kind of the sneakiest guy that could be a fantasy RB2 within the first couple weeks of the season that you can get at like truly the last pick of your draft.
Yeah, Roschon is definitely a guy that's kind of the unknown right now when it comes to that backfield. Like you mentioned, he sat behind Bijan and going through a lot of his tape when I was getting ready for the NFL draft he looked great on film. And then you had to wonder, why is this guy not getting any increased usage? Because he's definitely an efficient runner while he's on the field. But then you think about it and you're, oh man, this guy's behind Bijan Robinson. That's why. And so that you got him in the Chicago Bears backfield, higher draft capital, obviously. I think the coaching staff does like Khalil Herbert to a degree. You mentioned the most pure runner in that backfield. So I think that's how you're going to see that backfield shake out through most of the season, is that you're going to see a lot of shared time between Herbert and Roschon Johnson. Deonta Foreman, obviously the odd man out. He was kind of the waiver wire wonder for a lot of players last year with Carolina. Just grossly inefficient, but high usage. And
yes,
obviously one of those guys, the famed, comes back from an Achilles injury. So you're always kind of in the back of your mind going, all right, when's the other shoe going to drop with Deonta Foreman with a lot of these other guys in that Achilles injury? So I think I've kind of phased Foreman out in my rankings and how I view this backfield, but I agree with you. I think as the year starts to progress along, and it's obviously this is a trend we see with the running back position and rookies. As the year progresses, we're going to see a little bit more Roschon as things kind of get towards the end of the year. Obviously, we don't think the Bears are going to be that competitive as far as pushing for a playoff chance. I think they're going to want to see what they got in that young running back towards the end of the year as they build for the future. So Roschon is another guy. I'm above market on him right now as well. Another guy that I think you can get later on in drafts, maybe not pay off dividends right away, like you mentioned as well, but I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be there for you towards the end of the year. So I do like that one also. Well, let's get into a few fades real quick and talk about some of these guys that are higher up on the board as far as the consensus rankings, but guys that you see you're not getting too much in drafts and there's not really that much interest in. You think that they're going to kind of fall behind their current ADP.
So I've got 4 names in the top 24 that I don't like. I hate them as people, as we all know. I always have to do that qualifier. People are like, oh, do you hate the guy in person? Yes. I hate them. Truly. All right. Anyway, all jokes aside, I'm going to fade Jonathan Taylor as the consensus RB5. I really don't like this situation for fantasy. So Jonathan Taylor is playing with Anthony Richardson, a very mobile rookie quarterback. I think Taylor's going to be super efficient on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Their offensive line's fine. It's not good. It's not bad. He'll probably be efficient thanks to Richardson. But one thing we see year after year, these mobile quarterbacks, it's very tough to get the pass catching numbers for their running backs that we'd like. Mm-hmm. Taylor's already not a particularly exciting pass catcher. They drafted Evan Hull in the recent NFL draft, a running back who's around 50 receptions last year. That certainly does not scream to me that they want Taylor to be the pass catching back. Not that there even is going to be any pass catching available. And you might say, well, Josh, he's going to score some touchdowns and be efficient. All right, well, let's look at Miles Sanders on the Eagles last year. Miles Sanders had 15 carries a game behind the best offensive line in football, and he scored a lot of touchdowns. Sanders had 11 touchdowns, nearly 1,300 rushing yards. We can call this Jonathan Taylor light, because I think Jonathan Taylor, right, he'd probably get more than 15 carries a game. Yep. And then you realize, I'm sure it's basically the same in half PPR. I pulled up the PPR. Miles Sanders was the PPR RB21 per game.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, to tell me that a guy ran for nearly 1,300 rushing yards and had 11 rushing touchdowns, but because the guy's just not catching many passes, he finishes the RB21.
Yeah.
I'm kind of afraid that like that fate is what Jonathan Taylor's going to have. And again, I mentioned injuries before, like the running back position, it's chock full of injuries. I'd rather the guy gets touches through the air than the ground. I don't want him running between the tackles. Taylor's going to have a ton of work between the tackles. There's not going to be a lot of pass catching, higher injury risk per touch in that sense. So an offense that probably won't score a lot of touchdowns. Richardson's going to vulture some at the goal line. No targets. I mean, God, I just cannot pull the trigger on Taylor at RB5.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that. I've had the opportunity to get Taylor in plenty of underdog drafts, and I've found myself kind of letting him slip by to go for a guy that has a little bit more dual threat capabilities. You know, looking at it, you mentioned it last year, 40 targets, 28 receptions on the year last year. Anthony Richardson now under center, presumably starting, week 1. All right, we'll see how that plays out and if they put him in right away. But if he's playing the majority of the season, you just don't expect Richardson to do a lot of check downs to the running back position. And even if he does on third down passing situations, we saw Taylor come off the field quite a bit last year. You mentioned Evan Hull was a guy that I was high on in the pre-draft process as well. And I like the fit in Indy if they have a little bit more of that check down mentality with Richardson. I think Hull's going to be the guy that's going to be the beneficiary there long term in that offense. So I agree with you there on Taylor. We're right here together on one for one so far on fades.
All right, we'll see if we go 4 for 4. Probably not going to happen, but you never know.
Never know.
So the second guy I want to bring up is Aaron Jones. He goes at RB15. I am truly stumped. Outside of name value, what the heck we're doing here. So Aaron Jones is not the goal line back on a bad offense, doesn't get particularly high volume, and is now moving from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. Jordan Love is more mobile, and he's terrible, most likely. Why would I want the pass catching back who doesn't get goal line work with a mobile but bad quarterback? I truly don't know what's happening. I remember I put out a tweet a few weeks ago and people got pissed and they were like, you just cherry picked this stat. And I was like, I don't know what you mean by that. I just posted some touchdown numbers. Last year, A.J. Dillon led the Packers with 7 rushing touchdowns. And then I put that second place was Christian Watson with 2 rushing touchdowns. Fortunately, Aaron Jones tied Christian Watson with 2 rushing touchdowns. You can look at the usage. A.J. Dillon gets far more of the goal line, the within 10 yards type carries. Those are all A.J. Dillon's. He gets about 65, 70% of those carries, not Aaron Jones. I simply don't know what's going on. It's like people have ignored that Aaron Rodgers is not in town. There are no signs that point to me that the running back who turns 29 in December and has a monumental quarterback downgrade and doesn't get goal line work and probably won't even catch that many passes. I mean, gosh, I just don't understand what's happening. I think it's name value. But if you like Jones, maybe you can kind of talk me into him, because as of right now, I cannot draft the guy.
Yeah, and I think that's a similar situation to what we just talked about with Taylor and the quarterback situation with Richardson, is that, now you're going to see where Aaron Jones goes from last year, so 72 targets, 59 receptions. He's probably not touching that number with Jordan Love under center. So you take those numbers away, then you have to think to yourself, okay, where's the positive regression at this point?
Yes.
Is he going to get the rushing touchdowns? No, obviously not. That's what A.J. Dillon's forte is, and he's going to get those carries inside the 20, inside the 10 as well. So then you see yourself with Aaron Jones as a between the 20s type of running back in an offense that, we're expecting it to be a little bit more ground-oriented. I think if you're going to give any takeaway to Aaron Jones, is that the opportunities are probably going to go up this year. With Jordan Love, they're probably going to kind of dial back the offense, want to lean a little bit more on the run than they have in recent seasons with Aaron Rodgers under quarterback. I think that's the only caveat that you can give with Aaron Jones. So I do agree with your arguments against Aaron Jones, and obviously you putting out a tweet that makes people mad. I've never seen that. I don't know what you're talking about. So, but no, I agree with you on that point. I think, you get into a lot of fandom and name value with guys like an Aaron Jones. So guys are expecting, oh man, this guy's been a top 10, top 12 running back for my fantasy rosters each of the last few years. I'm going to keep riding the hot hand. And I think that's a situation now where he's currently going in drafts, I don't think he's going to meet that and bring back that value where you're getting him at ADP. So once again, I'm right on board with you with Aaron Jones in that discussion.
All right. Well, we're 2 for 2 so far. We're going to go maybe 3 for 3. I don't know. I'm going to fit Miles Sanders as the RB18. As I mentioned before, Miles Sanders was the RB21 per game last year behind the Eagles offensive line, getting a career high 15 carries a game and not getting a lot of passing work. And a lot of people have told me, Josh, I don't think you understand that the coaching staff, like with Deuce Staley, they're going to give Miles Sanders that pass catching work because other running backs in the past got that pass catching work. And to that, I say no. Miles Sanders is very good at some things. One thing he is not good at, one thing definitively he's not good at, he's an atrocious pass blocker. God, It's awful.
Yep.
The Carolina Panthers essentially put their future into Bryce Young's hands. They traded so much draft capital, DJ Moore even, to the Bears. They're invested. This is Bryce Young's team.
Yeah.
You cannot convince me that Miles Sanders is going to blow a pass block, because we know he is. That's just what he's done throughout his career. You cannot convince me that a pass block is blown in the sub 200-pound franchise quarterback Bryce Young gets hit and they go, you know what? Let's put the running back in, who just nearly got our quarterback killed because of fantasy points. Oh no. I have a very hard time seeing this pass catching upside that Sanders has, simply because he's terrible at pass blocking. The last thing you want to do is put the small rookie quarterback Bryce Young into uncomfortable situations. And Miles Sanders, his touch ceiling's probably capped. The Eagles saw what they had all 4 years in him, and he had, again, a career high 15 carries last year. We're drafting him above his per game fantasy finish with the Eagles, and he's now on the Panthers.
Yes.
This truly makes no sense. It's wish casting with the pass game role. And I think there's a pretty clear and obvious reason why Miles Sanders, after his rookie year, stopped getting pass catching work. Yeah, he's dynamic in space with the ball in his hands, but that is not worth getting your quarterback killed on blitz pickups.
Going 3 for 3. So Miles Sanders, I've got him behind the market. According to consensus right now, I've got him all the way down at RB24, and I've even fluctuated, had him outside the top 24 in recent rankings updates. So similar mindset. We know what we have with Miles Sanders. He's going to come off the field on third downs. He's not going to get those passing game opportunities. He was getting pulled off the field in Philadelphia for Kenneth Gainwell, who's a smaller running back than Miles Sanders. So, I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. This was always the discussion we had with Green Bay a number of years ago with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. As Jamal Williams was always on the field on third downs, and everybody was like, why is he on the field on third downs? Pass blocking. Whether the metrics showed good or bad, that's what the coaching staff believed in. And I think that's a similar situation here with Miles Sanders. They're going to have him on the field for early downs, in between the 20s. He's definitely going to get his usage out of that offense, but how good is that offense going to be in year one with Bryce Young and devoid of receiving talent that we've seen when they got rid of DJ Moore? So I'm right there with you as well on Aaron Jones. We're 3 for 3, and we got to finish out strong here and go 4 for 4.
All right, here we go. The fourth one, I am fading at the RB22, Alexander Mattison. So Alexander Madison's played 4 years in the NFL. He's never reached 500 rushing yards. And people tell me that Dalvin Cook played there, so that's why he didn't reach it. Okay. Well, Madison also had a career low last year in carries, and he had a career low in total yards. And over the past 2 seasons, people have been talking about how Dalvin Cook is not as good as he used to be. And behind the same offensive line, over the past 2 years, when people are complaining about Dalvin Cook's efficiency, spoiler alert, Dalvin Cook has averaged nearly a full yard per carry, 0.83 yards per carry higher for Dalvin Cook than Alexander Mattison behind the same offensive line. And the last time I checked, Dalvin Cook's getting way more carries. You ever worked out before? I've worked out before, and I can tell you this. If I have to go on a 3-mile run, I am more tired after 2 miles than I am when I'm starting my run.
Yes.
Running backs are human. They get tired. So despite Dalvin Cook getting more work, being more tired, he was significantly more efficient. Then people like to go and they say, well, look at the depth chart. It's Madison's backfield. And I think it's pretty interesting that he signed a 2-year, $7 million deal, which is backup running back money. And as we talked earlier, running backs, they're on their Zoom calls. They're rallying against these unfair wages. Yet apparently Madison wants 350 touches for $3 million. Maybe he does, but already that seems like a stretch when literally every other running back seems to not want that. Yeah. Then we also have comments from Vikings.com. Their main beat reporter put out a piece last week that essentially said, hey, Kevin O'Connell, all he does is talk about workload management and the recovery process and how he doesn't want anyone playing if they're not 100%. And he said that from other various comments, what he has deduced is that for the first time in many years, this is most likely a running back committee. And you might say, well, Josh, that's crazy. The Vikings never run running back committees. And you'd be right. That's what happens when you have Adrian Peterson from, I think it was from 2007 to 2016. And then you have Dalvin Cook from 2017 to 2022. Of course, you're not going to have running back committees. You had Adrian Peterson and then Dalvin Cook. And then on top of that, people, the last point in favor of Madison, they say, hey, Madison's been so good when he's the starter and spot starts.
Yeah.
Which is true. He averages like 20 fantasy points a game. It's awesome. Anyone that has spot started Madison has been pumped. But I think we need to realize who he spot started against. He has had 5 games in his career with a snap share above 50%. In 2020, he had one of those games versus the Lions. They allowed the 3rd most fantasy points in the NFL that year to running backs. In 2021, he had his final 4 games. So 2020, that one game versus the Lions, who allowed the 3rd most fantasy points. Then, oh my God, he faces the Lions twice and hit 2 of his 4 starts in 2021. The Lions expectedly were bad against running backs, and they actually coincidentally allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs. Then he had another start against the Seahawks. Oh, so convenient for Madison that in 2021, the Seahawks allowed the most fantasy points to running backs. How freaking lucky does this guy get? And that final game was the Rams, who allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points. Madison still had 16 fantasy points against them in PPR leagues, which is awesome. But it's because he had a rushing touchdown.
Yep.
He had 41 rushing yards, and he had 3 catches for 29 yards. I don't think that I want to bank on Madison having at least 17 touchdowns, which is kind of like what you're hoping for and what people say is like, this is the guy you get at RB2 prices who gives you RB1 numbers. I mean, guys, Dalvin Cook wasn't even an RB1 per game last year, and Dalvin Cook's better than Madison. I simply don't understand it. Even if you luck box your way into the Dalvin Cook type workload, Dalvin Cook was only slightly better than this last season. Mm-hmm. And we know Madison's worse. So I really don't understand what's going on here. Any signing nukes Madison, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette. For some reason, like Dalvin Cook returned, Ezekiel Elliott. There's so many guys out there that just nuke Madison because he's not good.
Yeah, and I'm right there with, again, we're 4 for 4, and you can call me an Alexander Madison. You can call me an Alexander Madison hater all you want to, but as soon as Dalvin Cook left, there was this rallying cry that Alexander Madison, oh my gosh, based on stat sheet spotting, like you've mentioned with some of his fantasy finishes, is we're not looking into the detailed numbers there. So the small sample size has been against subpar defenses. Yes. But now you're expecting him to take over the workload season long that Dalvin Cook has manned for the last several years. It's just not going to happen. And it probably has more to do with how much I like Ty Chandler and how much I do like Dwayne McBride coming in. Dwayne McBride is a yard after contact maven when in college, and he's coming into an offense now with a fairly solid offensive line. And Ty Chandler, the coaching staff, even back in preseason last year, talked him up, what he was doing in practices, how he looked in the preseason games. There's going to be an opportunity there for one of those two guys to take hold of a little bit of that workload there. And I've said it all along since Alexander Madison's been deemed the RB1 in this backfield, it's going to be more of a committee than what we want to really believe at this point in time. And because of that, I've got him all the way down there at RB28 right now. I just don't see it. I think season long, there's going to be too much of a split there for him to really outperform where he's getting and be return on investment. And that's the term that we always talk about in the fantasy industry is you want a guy that you draft and there's a higher return on investment for where you got him in your draft. Alexander Madison is going to be a cover boy for a guy that's just going to be negative ROI come season end, I think, at this point in time. So I'm right there with you again. 4 for 4 on the fades, or right there in the same mindset. I enjoy that. That's lovely. I do wanted to touch on before we kind of end the show, kind of getting close to wrapping things up. Did want to talk about rookie running backs just a little bit. Josh, you put out an article earlier today on the 33rdteam.com talking about rookie running backs, past performances, and how that they can be, advantageous for you in drafts by selecting them in your drafts and their performances down the line. It was a great read. If you've not been on the 33rd team to look at that article, I read it earlier today. It was an awesome read. Good work on that one. But rookie running backs, I know you pointed out a lot of statistics there in that article and how well it shows that they perform as the season progresses. And we've talked about it, with a few of the names here in this segment. But give me 2 of the rookie running backs. Let's go outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously, draft capital aside. 2 running backs outside of Jahmyr Gibbs that you're really kind of honing in on drafts right now.
So we've already mentioned a few because we mentioned Roschon Johnson. We mentioned Zach Charbonnet. I'll give you a couple more because there were more running backs drafted in this recent draft later on. And so one guy I really like is Tank Bigsby.
Yep.
He's a 0 for fantasy when ETN is healthy. However, people have been telling me for a while that Travis Etienne is injury prone. The way that he runs, the way that he cuts, opens himself up to injuries. I honestly don't know if that's real or not, but what I do know is that running backs in general often get injured when they have high volume. Tank Bigsby has 3rd round draft capital. The Jaguars have an awesome offense. They're going to score a ton of points. Usually a good offense is all else equal, great for the running back. He looks like an incredibly inexpensive, straight up handcuff. ETN goes pretty early in fantasy drafts, and I think Bigsby slips right into a very similar type role where Bigsby's not as good as ETN anywhere, but he's very well-rounded. He's athletic enough, good enough pass catcher, showed that he could handle moderate volume throughout college. So that's one name that I think is a very nice pick later in drafts. Like, I'll say this. Jaylen Warren goes much earlier than Tank Bigsby in every format. Jaylen Warren is the straight-up handcuff to Najee Harris. Najee Harris and ETN often go in a similar range in fantasy drafts.
Yep.
I don't quite understand why Bigsby, who's almost certainly better because he has third-round draft capital, whereas Jaylen Warren was undrafted. I don't really know why there's a gap. Maybe you prefer Jaylen Warren because you saw him do it at times last year. But, I mean, come on. These guys go way far apart.
Yeah.
So if you just want the straight-up handcuff who's only startable, if the other guy goes down, Tank Bigsby's your guy.
Yeah.
We'll go one more deep one. This is a weird one because he's tiny. But I think Devin Achane is interesting.
Yeah.
So Devin Achane was taken by the Dolphins in round 3. He was a college sprinter. He ran a 4.32 40. He's super fast. He actually had pretty good volume at Texas A&M as a pure runner. He took a ton of carries away from Isaiah Spiller. And I know Isaiah Spiller didn't do anything with the Chargers last year. He looks like a bust. But Isaiah Spiller was a very good college running back. He was an early declare. He still went in the 4th round to the Chargers. So it's not like the NFL hated him. Devin Achane at 190 pounds was keeping him off the field quite often. And Achane had some pretty great looking reception numbers too. I understand that he's only around 190 pounds, but we did see him do it in college at a pretty good program where he's getting legitimate heavy volume. We know he has breakaway speed. And the guy that I've comped him to for fantasy is, I think he's like higher volume Nyheim Hines is what he can be. And I don't think people remember that Nyheim Hines was pretty good in PPR leagues early in his career.
Yep.
He had 2 seasons with more than 60 receptions, including over 60 receptions as a rookie. I could see him reaching around there where Tua Tagovailoa, that is the type of quarterback, the pressure-sensitive, non-mobile quarterback. He could be checking the ball down a lot to Achane. Mostert, Jeff Wilson, these are not really pass catchers. So I like that he could get 50, 60, more, even more than that, potentially receptions. And, I mean, what if he gives you 10 carries on the ground?
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect that. But given what he did in college, I don't think it's the craziest thing to think that in the modern NFL, this 190-pound guy who's kind of built like a brick house, I think I could see him getting 12 to 15 touches a game.
Yeah, now I'm right there with you. Of course, the big question mark when it comes to Achane and that Dolphins backfield is where's Dalvin Cook going? I think that's the big atom bomb that we're waiting on right now. Is if I think Dalvin Cook eventually signs there, or at least that's my hope. But even still, Dalvin Cook lands there, that up-tempo offense, like you mentioned, I think there's opportunity to be had in a passing game role to get upwards of 50 catches and, be a guy that you can spot start as a flex starter during the 2023 season. So I agree with that. Achane was actually a real fun watch. I'm down here in SEC country in Tennessee, so I watch a lot of Texas A&M and a lot of their games. Achane was a guy that I was high on in the pre-draft process as well. Just landing spot seemed to be perfect where they took him. So I think that he fits in with that offense and what Mike McDaniel wants to do. That, like I mentioned, that up-tempo offense, they're going to keep moving. Opportunities is going to be the name of the game down there. So one little nugget I want to throw in there before we sign things off with the rookie running backs is I want to get your take on if there's a chance. There's this one guy that I really, really like, and I hope he gets an opportunity in the backfield. Sean Tucker with the Buccaneers.
I like Sean Tucker. So I like that he has the all-purpose skill set where he handled some high volume on the ground and through the air at Syracuse. I also like that the Buccaneers just have nobody.
Right.
I understand he was undrafted, but I mean, Rachaad White was pretty bad as a rookie. He looks pretty locked into volume, but again, that's a pretty dangerous proposition in fantasy to just assume that a minimally talented running back is just guaranteed volume. We already discussed that with Alexander Madison. And also Rachaad White could get hurt. I honestly don't even fully know who's in this backfield. Is what Keyshawn Vaughn. I think Chase Edmonds might be there actually,
Chase
which is
Edmonds.
kind of
Yep.
hilarious. Where his career went.
Falling
This is
off.
not a good backfield. So I think when you have a rookie with some athleticism, and it's a very uncertain situation, he's got the all-purpose skill set. I'm definitely taking some stabs on Tucker if he makes the roster, and if we hear any buzz, kind of like with Pacheco last year, where all of a sudden it was like, oh, like Pacheco might actually be a threat for like legitimate work, then I will just keep pumping Sean Tucker up my draft boards.
Yeah, that's kind of my late round, pretty much last round of underdog drafts, almost nailing him every time here. How things have been going in the last couple of weeks, and the news today where he's 100% medically cleared and ready for camp, I think was a big indication of that they're going to want to try to get him out there and see what he can do in that backfield. And like you mentioned, there's opportunities to be had in that backfield. So I think it's an encouraging sign for Sean Tucker as we progress into the training camp. So wrapping things up, man, Josh, it was a pleasure having you on here. You want to let everyone know where to find you, all your stuff, throwing out your all your media credentials there.
Yeah, Brandon, thanks for having me on. It was good to get our first FaceTime in.
Definitely.
You can find me on Twitter at JLarkyTweets. All my work is free on the33rdteam.com for the entire 2023 NFL season. I'll have fantasy rankings. We'll be doing prop bets every single week. Hopefully we hit at the same rate last year. We were all up about 30 units in the NFL, and there's 3 of us that are going to be behind that product. We'll be giving them to you for free in our Discord. So would recommend that if anyone wants to tail some prop bets that hit at a pretty good rate, want some data-driven fantasy rankings, check us out. And it won't detract anything that Brandon's doing because we're free. So if you want to pay for Rotoballer, guess what? You can do that and still check us out as well. You can get 2 for the price of 1.
Brandon, yes, man, I appreciate it. Josh, a pleasure. Like you mentioned, it was good to have you on, have that first initial face-to-face. Great discussion. I'm glad we could have you on tonight. And I know you got a draft coming up with the Pros versus Joe's draft. So I'll let you get on out of here and I'll put a finish on the show.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one. All right, guys. That was Josh Larky at JLarkyTweets on Twitter, as he mentioned, the 33rdteam.com. Was an amazing talk. Glad we could kind of go through these running backs and kind of help you prepare for drafts with this running back position. Of course, as always, you can find me at Roto Superstar. This is at Woo_fantasy. Go to rotoballer.com, promo code Woo for that special discount at checkout. And until next time, when we're going to talk some wide receivers, ladies and gentlemen, that will be the purpose of this next podcast. And until then, we will see you on another episode of Woo Fantasy. Woo!